Have you ever seen someone doing something small and wondered why they kept doing it? That was how it started for the soldiers at Fort Myers, a quiet army base just outside the city. Every Saturday morning, before most people were even awake, a young man named Marcus arrived at the edge of the base. Marcus didn't wear a uniform. He didn't carry any tools besides an old red lung or a gas can, and a pair of gloves that had clearly been used for years. He didn't speak to anyone unless someone greeted him first. He just got to work, pushing the loud mower back and forth across the patchy grass outside the barracks. It wasn't official work. No one had hired him. At first, the soldiers inside the barracks thought he must be someone from base maintenance or maybe part of a cleanup program. But he didn't come with a crew, and he never used the fancy equipment the regular workers had. He just showed up, did the job quietly, and left without saying much. Some of the younger soldiers watched him through the windows. They joked around at first, wondering who he was. They gave him nicknames like the Lawn Guy or Weekend Warrior. But Marcus didn't seem to notice or care. He stayed focused on his work. He trimmed the grass neatly, bagged the clippings, and swept up the edges with care, like someone taking care of their own home. What made it stranger was that he never asked for anything. Not money, not help, not even a thank you. When someone offered him water once, he nodded and said thank you softly, then went right back to mowing. His clothes were simple: old jeans, a faded hoodie, and worn-out sneakers. Sometimes he wore earphones, but other times he just listened to the sound of the mower and the birds. He always came alone and always left quietly when he was finished. For weeks, the soldiers didn't ask questions. They just watched. But the sight of him began to stick in their minds. Something about the way he worked, so steady, so focused, made them feel like there was more to the story. One Saturday, as Marcus packed up his things, a private named Lopez finally spoke up. "Hey man, why do you come here every week?" he asked. Marcus paused, gave a small smile, and just said, "Just doing something that matters." Then he walked away. Lopez stood there for a moment confused, but somehow that answer made sense. Whatever the reason, Marcus believed in what he was doing, and that made others start to believe in it too. They didn't know his story yet, not the full one, but they were about to find out something that would change how they saw him forever. The next Saturday, Marcus was back, just like always. The sun hadn't even risen yet, and the air was still cool. Inside the barracks, the soldiers had been talking about him all week. Some had started to wonder who he really was and why he came back every weekend. No one knew much about him except for the fact that he was always there, quietly mowing the lawn. Marcus didn't seem to care about what anyone thought. He just came, did his work, and left. To him, the routine was simple but meaningful. It wasn't about showing off or getting attention. It was something he did because he had promised someone that he would. As Marcus worked, he didn't notice that a small group of soldiers had gathered at the window, watching him from inside the barracks. They were curious. Some of them, like Private Lopez, had never seen anyone so dedicated to a task with no reward, no praise. It was as if he had made it his mission to mow this lawn every week without fail. The group talked amongst themselves, guessing about his story. Maybe he was a former soldier who missed the army life, or maybe he had lost someone and was doing this to honor them. No one knew for sure, but there was something about Marcus's quiet determination that made them feel like they were missing an important piece of the puzzle. At that moment, a senior officer named Colonel Burke walked into the barracks. He had been watching from a distance and was also curious about the mystery of the lawnmower. He had seen Marcus before, but he had never spoken to him. Today, something inside him told him it was time to find out more. "Who is that?" Colonel Burke asked, nodding toward Marcus. "Oh, that's the guy who mows the lawn every week," Private Lopez replied. "No one knows why, but he's out there, rain or shine." "Every week?" the colonel asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yep, never misses a Saturday, doesn't ask for anything, just mows." Colonel Burke stood there for a moment, looking at Marcus through the window. He was struck by the quietness of it all. No one had ever seen anyone like this before. Marcus wasn't asking for attention. He wasn't asking for anything at all. He was simply doing something, day after day, that seemed to matter only to him. After a few minutes, the colonel turned to Lopez and the others. "Keep an eye on him," he said, his voice firm. "I think we need to talk to him." Marcus didn't know it yet, but today would be different. Today, someone would finally ask him why he did what he did. And when they did, it would change everything. The soldiers didn't know that Marcus wasn't just mowing the lawn. He was keeping a a promise made long before he ever set foot on that base. It was a promise he kept not for praise or recognition, but because it was something he had to do. Marcus didn't notice the colonel and the soldiers watching him as he finished mowing the last strip of grass. He was so focused on his work that he didn't even hear the footsteps approaching from behind. When he finally pushed the lawnmower back to its spot near the gate, he turned around and saw the colonel standing there watching him. Colonel Burke was tall, with a face that seemed to hold a lot of years of experience. His uniform was clean and crisp, his expression serious but not unkind. He wasn't sure what to expect, but there was something about Marcus that made him want to understand more. Marcus stopped in his tracks, unsure of what to do. The colonel gave a small nod. "You've been coming here every Saturday," the colonel began, his voice calm but curious. "Why?" Marcus paused for a moment, looking down at the grass beneath his feet. He had been asked that question before, but never by someone in charge, someone like the colonel. It felt different, like this time the question mattered. "I come to mow the lawn," Marcus said, his voice soft and simple. "I just do it because it needs doing." The colonel raised an eyebrow. "It's more than just about the grass, isn't it?" Marcus looked at him, surprised by the question. He wasn't used to people asking about why he did what he did, or caring for that matter. Most people just assumed he was a volunteer or part of some program. But the colonel was different. "It's about a promise," Marcus replied after a long pause. He glanced at the barracks, where the soldiers still looked out the windows, watching from a distance. The colonel tilted his head, sensing there was more to the story than Marcus was letting on. "A promise?" he asked. Marcus took a deep breath and finally spoke up. "My brother. He was stationed here a long time ago, before he went to war. He always complained about how the lawn outside the barracks got overgrown, how it looked messy. He said it made the place feel neglected. I promised him I'd come take care of it after he was gone." The colonel listened carefully, taking in every word. The sadness in Marcus's voice was clear, but there was something else too, something like determination. Marcus wasn't doing this for attention. He wasn't doing it to get anything in return. He was keeping a promise, one that was bigger than just mowing grass. "You didn't have to do this," the colonel said gently. "No one asked you to." Marcus shook his head, a faint smile on his face. "I know, but it's something I needed to do, something he would wanted." The colonel stood there for a moment, his expression softening. He could tell that Marcus wasn't just mowing lawns. He was honoring his brother's memory in a way that few people ever would. And in that moment, the colonel understood something important. "Thank you for doing this," the colonel said, "for keeping your promise." Marcus simply nodded, his eyes briefly meeting the colonel's. "It's the least I can do." The colonel watched as Marcus gathered his tools and walked away, his back straight and purposeful. Marcus didn't seek recognition or praise. He wasn't doing this for anyone but himself, for a promise made long ago. And that, the colonel realized, was what made it so powerful. The next Saturday, things started to change at Fort Myers. Marcus arrived early as usual, with his old red lawnmower and gloves in hand. He was used to being alone when he worked. It had always been that way. But today, when he reached the familiar patch of grass, he saw something unexpected. A small group of soldiers was standing near the entrance of the barracks, watching him. He didn't recognize any of them at first, but one of them, Private Lopez, waved at him. Marcus paused for a moment, unsure of what to do. He wasn't used to being noticed. Usually people ignored him or assumed he was just a worker. But now it seemed different. The soldiers weren't just watching, they were waiting. "Hey, Marcus," Lopez called out, a friendly grin on his face. "We figured we'd give you a hand today." Marcus blinked in surprise. He didn't understand. He had never asked for help, and he didn't expect anyone to offer. "You don't have to," Marcus said, shaking his head. "This is something I do." Lopez shrugged. "Well, we thought we could help out. You've been doing this every week. Seems like the least we can do." Marcus looked around, still unsure. The soldiers had come out of the barracks, carrying their own lawnmowers and tools. Some of them even had weed whackers in hand, ready to tackle the edges of the grass. They were smiling, joking with each other as they prepared to work. It felt strange to Marcus. He wasn't used to people joining him. But there was something about their kindness, something that made him realize they weren't just helping with the lawn. They were showing respect for what he had been doing all this time. "You sure?" Marcus asked, still hesitant. "Yeah," said Lopez, stepping forward. "We just thought it would be good to pitch in. You've been out here all this time alone. We figured we could make it a team effort." Marcus felt a wave of gratitude he wasn't sure how to express. It wasn't just about the help. It was about what it meant. The soldiers weren't just mowing the lawn. They were showing him that they cared, that they understood the meaning behind what he had been doing all along. Together, they worked. The sound of the mowers filled the air, and for the first time, Marcus felt like he wasn't the only one carrying the weight of this small but important task. The soldiers laughed and joked as they worked, making the time pass quickly. Marcus even found himself smiling, though he was still focused on the task at hand. By the time they finished, the lawn outside the barracks looked better than it had in a long time. The grass was neatly trimmed, the edges were sharp, and the whole area had a fresh, cared-for feeling. Marcus stepped back and looked at the work they had done together. "Thanks," he said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. "I really appreciate this." Lucas nodded. "No problem, Marcus. You've been doing this on your own for so long. It's the least we could do." Marcus looked at the soldiers, his heart full. He had kept his promise to his brother for all this time, but today he realized that he wasn't alone in it anymore. The soldiers had shown him that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness could make the biggest difference. The following Saturday, Marcus arrived as usual, his old red langur in tow. The sun was still low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the base. The grass was a little taller than the week before, and Marcus knew the task would take him a little longer. But that didn't bother him. He had grown used to the routine, and it gave him time to think. As he walked toward the lawn, he noticed something different. This time, it wasn't just a few soldiers standing nearby ready to help. A larger group had gathered, all standing with mowers, tools, and even rakes in hand. Marcus stopped for a moment, feeling a wave of surprise and confusion wash over him. He hadn't expected this. After last week, he thought it would be just Lopes and a couple others. "Hey, Marcus," Lucas called out with a grin. "We've got a few more people today." Marcus stood still, trying to take in the sight of so many soldiers standing there. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They had become a team, all joining together for a task that, up until now, had always been his alone. He couldn't help but feel moved by the gesture. It wasn't just about the lawn anymore. It was about respect and support. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said, his voice quieter than usual. "I can handle it." "We know you can," Lucas said, walking toward him with a friendly smile. "But you've been doing this by yourself for so long. We thought it was time we'd all pitched in." Marcus looked at the group, his eyes lingering on the faces of the soldiers who had come out to help. Some of them were familiar from the week before, but there were others he didn't recognize. It seemed like the whole base had come together for this task. "This is a lot," Marcus said, still unsure how to feel. He had always worked alone, and now, seeing everyone ready to help, he felt a strange mixture of gratitude and humility. He didn't expect this kind of attention, but at the same time, he realized how much it meant to him. "Don't worry, man," Lucas said, patting him on the shoulder. "We're all in this together." With that, Marcus nodded slowly, his heart swelling with a quiet sense of pride. He wasn't sure how to put it into words, but he felt deeply moved by their willingness to help. The soldiers weren't just mowing the lawn. They were showing him that they understood his promise and respected his commitment. It wasn't just about cutting grass anymore. It was about the bonds they had formed and the respect they had for one another. Together, they worked in silence for a while, the sound of the mowers and tools filling the air. Marcus, for the first time, felt like he wasn't alone in the work. He was part of something bigger, a group of people who cared, who were willing to take on a task that he had been doing by himself for so long. By the time they finished, the lawn looked perfect, freshly mowed, the edges crisp and sharp. Marcus stepped back and took a deep breath, taking in the sight of what they had accomplished together. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, his voice full of sincerity. "This means more than you know." Lucas smiled. "You don't have to thank us. We're just glad to help out." Marcus looked around at the group of soldiers who had helped him, and for the first time, he didn't feel like he was carrying the weight of his promise alone. The task had been shared, and so had the respect that came with it. As the weeks went by, Marcus continued to show up every Saturday, just like he had before. But now, things were different. The soldiers had become a regular part of his routine. Each week, more of them gathered to help, and each week, they worked together in silence, all of them focused on the task at hand. The lawn was always neatly mowed by the time they finished, but it was more than just the grass that was getting tended to. With every week that passed, Marcus felt like something bigger was growing. He had always kept his promise to his brother quietly, without anyone noticing. But now the soldiers were with him, and he could see that they understood what it meant. It wasn't just about keeping the lawn neat. It was about honoring something deeper, a connection to someone who had served before them. One Saturday morning, as Marcus walked to the edge of the base with his mower, he saw that the soldiers were already waiting for him. This time there were even more than before, more faces, more smiles, and more tools ready to work. Lopez waved as he saw Marcus approach. "Morning, Marcus. We're ready to get started whenever you are," Lopez called out. Marcus smiled, feeling the warmth of their support. "Thanks, Lopez," he said. "It's good to see all of you here. You've been doing this for a long time on your own. We figured it was time we stepped in and helped," Lopez replied. Marcus nodded. He hadn't expected this kind of support when he first started mowing the lawn, and it had taken him by surprise. But now he realized how much it meant to him. They weren't just helping with a chore. They were sharing in the memory of his brother, and that made all the difference. The group began to work, moving in sync as they split the task between them. Marcus worked alongside them, just like before, but this time there was a sense of togetherness he hadn't felt before. They worked in quiet cooperation, each person knowing their part. The air was filled with the hum of lawnmowers and the rustling of grass being cut, but there was something more in the air. An unspoken bond, a feeling of respect for one another. As they finished the lawn that morning, Marcus stepped back and took a deep breath, taking in the sight of their work. The grass was perfectly trimmed, the edges sharp and clean. It looked as if the whole base had been cared for, not just the lawn. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. This really means a lot to me." Lopez grinned and clapped him on the back. "We're just glad to help out, Marcus. You don't have to thank us. We're happy to be part of it." Marcus looked around at the group, his heart full. These soldiers hadn't just helped him with the lawn. They had helped him carry a memory, a promise he had made long ago. They had become part of something bigger than just a task. They had become part of his brother's story, and that made everything feel more meaningful. As they walked back toward the barracks, Marcus felt a warmth in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't just keeping a promise anymore. He was sharing it, and in doing so, he had created a connection that would last beyond the grass and the mowers. One Saturday, Marcus arrived at the base, expecting the usual scene. Soldiers waiting to help, tools in hand, ready to work. But this time, as he walked toward the lawn, he noticed something different. The group of soldiers wasn't standing near the entrance like usual. Instead, they were gathered around a table, talking in low voices. It was a little unusual, and Marcus felt a small knot form in his stomach. He wasn't sure what was going on, but when Lopez saw him approaching, he waved him over with a big smile. "Hey, Marcus, we were just discussing something. Come on over," Lopez called out. Marcus, still unsure, walked over slowly. As he neared the table, he saw that a few of the soldiers had papers spread out in front of them, and some were writing on notepads. "What's all this about?" Marcus asked, trying to hide his confusion. "We wanted to do something special," Lopez explained, looking up with a grin. "We've been thinking. You've been coming here every week, working hard, and we want to give back. We figured it's time to show you how much we appreciate what you've been doing." Marcus blinked in surprise. He wasn't used to people doing things for him. All he had ever wanted was to keep his promise, but now it seemed like the soldiers wanted to do something for him in return. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked quietly. One of the soldiers, Private Wilson, spoke up. "We've been talking about organizing a small ceremony, something simple just to honor what you've been doing here. It's not just about the lawn. It's about your commitment, your respect for your brother, and the memory you're keeping alive. We want to make sure that's recognized." Marcus felt his heart race a little. He wasn't sure what to say. All he had ever wanted was to mow the lawn in silence, to keep his promise. The thought of a ceremony of recognition made him uncomfortable. "I don't know about that," Marcus said, shaking his head. "I don't need a ceremony. I'm just doing what I promised." Lopez smiled kindly, his eyes full of understanding. "We know, Marcus. We know you didn't do this for recognition, but you've touched all of us. We want to show you that we see it. We see the promise, and we respect it. You've been doing this on your own for so long. It's time we show you that you're not alone." Marcus looked at the group of soldiers. He could see the sincerity in their faces. They weren't doing this to make him feel awkward or uncomfortable. They were doing it because they had seen something in him, something that made them want to give back in the only way they knew how. "I appreciate that," Marcus said slowly, feeling his throat tighten a little. "I really do. But I'm just doing what I promised. And that's exactly why we want to honor you," Private Wilson said gently. "It's the kind of commitment we all admire." Marcus nodded, the weight of their words settling in. Maybe this wasn't about him after all. Maybe it was about the promise, the memory of his brother, and the way that memory had brought them all together. He didn't know how to thank them, but somehow he didn't need to. The soldiers understood. Okay, Marcus said finally, a small smile forming. Thank you. If this means something to you, then we'll do it. The soldiers grinned, and the room seemed to lighten. They were all ready to honor the promise Marcus had kept, and he was ready to let them. The day of the ceremony arrived, and Marcus felt a mix of emotions. He wasn't sure how to feel. He had never expected anything like this. As he walked to the barracks, he could see that things were different. The lawn looked even more well-kept than usual, and there were small flags along the edges, adding to the feeling that something important was about to happen. The soldiers had worked hard to make the place look perfect. When he arrived, Lopez and the others greeted him with smiles and handshakes. They looked excited, as if they had been planning this for a long time. Marcus, still feeling a little out of place, stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. "We got everything ready," Lopez said, his voice cheerful. "It's going to be a small ceremony, but it's all for you." Marcus nodded, grateful but unsure. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not for something like this. All he had done was keep a promise, something he had promised his brother. He had never expected anyone else to notice, let alone want to honor it. The ceremony was small, just a few soldiers, some of the base officers, and a few of the other men who had joined to help with the lawn. But as they gathered in a circle around Marcus, he felt something he hadn't expected, a deep sense of connection. The soldiers didn't just see him as the man who mowed the lawn every week. They saw him for the promise he had kept, and for the strength it took to carry it out, week after week. Lopez stepped forward, holding a small plaque in his hands. It wasn't anything big, but to Marcus, it felt like the most meaningful thing he had ever received. The plaque read, "In honor of Marcus and the promise he keeps, dedicated to the memory of his brother and the love that never fades." "This is for you, Marcus," Lopez said quietly, his voice filled with respect. "We just want you to know that we see you, and we honor what you've done. You've been doing this alone for so long, and we wanted to show you that you don't have to anymore. We're here with you." Marcus stood there, his throat tight, not knowing how to respond. He hadn't expected a plaque. He hadn't expected any of this. All he had wanted was to keep his promise, but in that moment he realized something important. The soldiers weren't just honoring him, they were honoring his brother's memory. They were recognizing the bond that had kept Marcus coming back week after week, and in doing so, they had given him something he didn't know he needed, a sense of belonging. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "This means more to me than you know." The soldiers nodded, their faces full of understanding. They had never been just about the task of mowing the lawn. They had seen something in Marcus that they respected deeply, and they wanted to show him that he wasn't alone in his effort. He had a family here, one that shared in his memories and his promise. As the ceremony ended, Marcus looked around at the soldiers, feeling a warmth in his heart that he had never expected. He wasn't just keeping a promise anymore. He was part of something bigger, a community that respected and understood him. And that, he realized, was the greatest gift of all.